Journalist, Washington Post columnist, and Saudi dissident Jamal Khashoggi was very likely killed after going into the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey to get documents so he could wed his Turkish fiancée. He never came out of that embassy, and the details are grisly. Pro-government Turkish newspaper Sabah identified a 15-member team of suspected Saudi agents who flew in and out of Istanbul on the day of the disappearance. The group brought a bone saw into the consulate, and one of its members was a doctor who specialized in post-mortems, Turkish officials say. The international community is understandably outraged by this and are calling for an end to America's $110 billion weapons sale to Saudi Arabia. Trump had this to say in response.
They're spending $110 billion purchasing military equipment and other things. If we don't sell it to them, they'll say, well, thank you very much, we'll buy it from Russia, or thank you very much, we'll buy it from China. That doesn't help us, not when it comes to jobs and not when it comes to our companies losing out on that work.
The good old jobs deflection, a Republican classic. Trump, could this have anything to do with the fact that you personally have bragged about doing billions of dollars in business with the Saudi government, or this? Earlier this year, the Trump International Hotel was able to turn around its 2-year losing streak, seeing a profit in the first 3 quarters of 2018. How? A 5-day stay in March by members of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's entourage. But don't worry, Trump called it fake news, so he didn't actually do anything wrong. It's especially outrageous because a new report shows that bin Salman personally ordered the operation to lure journalist Jamal Khashoggi from his home in Virginia to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last week and had him murdered. So Trump's continued cozy, corrupt relationship with the prince and his unwillingness to confront him on this issue is even more outrageous. But what's more, Saudi Arabia is a hotbed of humanitarian disasters, and it's been this way for decades. The media is just now deciding to pressure Trump because the Saudis killed one of their own, a journalist. But Trump, the media, and presidents and politicians before him, Democrat and Republican, have chosen to ignore the U.S. allies' revolting record. Here's a reminder. Just 2 months ago, the Saudi-led coalition killed 44 children on a school bus in Yemen. They are waging a genocidal war in the country, which escalated after Saudi Arabia chose to intervene in early 2015. They are blockading health care from the nation as an outbreak of cholera ravages the country, and the UN estimates that between 12 and 13 million people are at risk of starvation within the next 3 months if the Saudi Arabian-led coalition continues its bombing of Yemen. And it isn't just Trump who supports this terroristic war. 55 senators, including 10 Democrats, voted against Senator Bernie Sanders, Chris Murphy, and Mike Lee's bill to end American support for the war. That Saudi oil money has got to be really worth it, right? How about the time Saudi Arabia sentenced a man to prison and a public lashing for saying that he was an atheist? Or the time Saudi Arabia sentenced 3 teenage boys to death by beheading and tortured them for attending a protest? I could go on, but the fact of the matter is that members of the mainstream press and politicians have ignored Saudi Arabia's horrific behavior long before the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. In fact, industry leaders and politicians even embrace Crown Prince bin Salman as some new age Saudi leader after he allowed women to drive. Groundbreaking. Here he is getting coffee with perpetual presidential candidate Michael Bloomberg, and they're in a Starbucks. How silly. Bin Salman also had dinner with Fox News head Rupert Murdoch and Disney CEO Bob Iger, while his buddies took selfies with The Rock and Morgan Freeman. Actually. The point is that it isn't just Trump. Elites have been embracing Saudi Arabia for far too long, while at the same time saying that we can't have peace with Iran. They're an oppressive regime. But because we have a strategic geopolitical relationship with Saudi Arabia, and because they give us that good oil, we're willing to let a lot more slide. But what happens when Saudi Arabia's oil projections are actually pretty low and shaky? What happens if that well begins to run dry? Maybe then people decide that this murder is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Bernie Sanders says that he is reintroducing his legislation to end our support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. We'll see which politicians step up and actually walk the talk on this, because one thing's for sure, Donald Trump won't go against his own business interests in Saudi Arabia unless he is forced to. Let's force him.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.